How long do you think they've been planning this pandemic? Well, the furthest back I can go, and I might be wrong because there's probably more information. But if you go back to 2010, at least the scenarios were being thought up and brainstormed. So if you read Lockstep by the Rockefeller Foundation, Lockstep, it's a full document, and you go to page 18, you will see a very detailed summary of how to use a pandemic to implement authoritarian control and expand technological development. That in itself is the footnote for what's going on perfectly. It's exactly what's going on. And so that's 2010. So to just write that off, being that the Rockefeller Foundation is in very heavily influenced into the medical industry, that goes back to the American Medical Association when Rockefeller and buddies took all their money and said, we think it's important to invest in in the medicine and the schooling. And everyone's like, yes, I'm so glad you're here to do that. Cool, rich people philanthropy. And then they said, okay, well, yeah, we're going to fund it. And then we're going to also get some board members involved. And we're going to dictate what people are learning in medicine in schools and universities. And they just kept expanding it. So they basically co-opt the medical association. And then from there, they got their people in there, and they're basically using medicine to direct their own personal sort of teleos or end goal, their vision of the world and society. And they're tying it to, and that's why people are retarded if they think science and medicine can't be co-opted by an ideology. Everything has an ideology. There's no escaping it. There's no escaping it. So the idea of progress has been arbitrarily taken over by the scientific and medical establishment. They sell their idea of progress, and what better way to sell progress by having a crisis by which the progress being sold is the remedy to the crisis. Same shit that military does. Now science is doing it. And Ike, the little dude, every time they mention Eisenhower's speech, it's always the military industrial complex. We got to watch out for the military industrial complex. Yeah. Okay. We see that. We were in a 20-year war based on WMDs, and the fear of some goat fucker blowing themselves up with a vest. And that justified the Patriot Act. That justified massive technological and military expansion all over the world for 20 years straight. All unjustified. So the new ISIS is pandemics. And they're doing the same thing because Eisenhower, if you listen closely to the tail end after he talks about the military-industrial complex, he talks about the scientific industrial complex and how that was even more likely to turn into a dictatorship. And this is how it's done, This is how it's done.
Product that will no longer need this
snakes.
Incoming passenger card
look
because
at the
we'll have a fully
crocodiles.
Digital incoming passenger
kangaroos.
Card. And what's more, by having a digital product in the future, should there be a globally available vaccine, we'll be able to attach a authentic vaccination certificate to the incoming passenger card so that we will know if a person has indeed had that vaccination or not, and therefore they will be able to enter into Australia potentially without quarantining. Furthermore, by digitising this, we have much greater authenticity and integrity associated with who the individual is, because typically you'd do this on your phone. An image would be taken of your face, which would match up to your passport to ensure there is integrity in relation to the identity of the individual.
And then, if you took a test for COVID and they collected your DNA because 23andMe didn't work, then your face is also matched up to your DNA and everything. This is the whole thing, you guys. It's about creating a global system for identity that's linked to your medical, to your DNA, and bypassing basically HIPAA law on the massive government scale. I don't know if they'll be able to overturn HIPAA laws in the United States, which protect your medical, identities and information and backgrounds and whatnot. But at the global level, it's actually easier because all of the countries have different laws internally for their citizens. But as far as what they decide is required for people to enter or leave, maybe, is totally up to them. So globalism bypasses a lot of civil liberty standards inside their nations. So, but that's the whole deal. It's all about racing to whoever can get and whoever controls the mirror world of people, identities, DNA, face stuff, and movement, trackability and whatnot. So it's all a very silly game. Here's the good news, you guys. Really good news. These kind of systems, as much as we want to fight against them, a lot of it, some of it is inevitable based on just tech. What happens with tech? People always go toward what's convenient. And so the good news is these systems are going to exacerbate immobility. They're going to push a whole section of people in all countries into an immobile state. And a lot of people are like, but I want to go wherever I want because it's freedom and I get to go anywhere I want and we're free. Yeah, but the thing is, just because you can go everywhere, right? It doesn't mean that's the ideal way of living. That doesn't mean that labor mobility is a good thing. That doesn't mean, because ultimately you're looking at what kind of society do you want to live in. So if you think about it and you go, I don't want to live in a society and a culture that stops me from flying to Australia to look at the snakes, look at the kangaroos, look at the snakes. It looks like you're able to visit us because you don't have the COVID. No, because if you're saying you want a society or culture like this, like that, ultimately you're also saying you need to be able to maintain those things. So the irony is this whole movement, transcontinental lifestyle, this idea that we're always moving and migrating and changing patterns, is totally antithetical to the idea of maintaining foundations, cultures, national identities, basically the cohesion of life. And the good news is, because this is going to spark a big movement of homesteading, staying in place, the irony is that it actually breeds conditions that oppose globalism. That's what's so funny about all of this, is that it's a globalist agenda that is going to backfire because the results, the symptoms of such an agenda, the measures are going to keep people in place. Shelter in place. Well, shelter in place, extrapolated to a larger view, is generational living on the land, staying where you are, building where you are. Not because it's just because it's awesome, but because there are constraints otherwise. So that's going to stop labor mobility. That's going to be a good thing. It's going to stop splintering of families, leaving, going all sorts of places, and having all of your family are just become little nodes that are equally spread out across the world, like someone just sprinkled salt, on a pile of pasta. It's like, that's not how you maintain the cultures that you do want. The values you do want ultimately result in generational living, living close to your community that you share values with. So this is the good thing that's going to come out of this inadvertently. Like every movement they take, there's some backlash that they didn't think of, because they don't think in terms of how people actually want to live. Normal peasants like you and I, they think in how elites want people to live, and so it's not based on truth. In the end, it's not based on truth. So whenever you see this stuff and you get all frazzled and you give your little panties a hike up and you feel weird and you get panicky and you want to cry to someone, just know that all of it ends up putting you exactly where you want to be. Just know that where you want to be and what you want to do ultimately will be the case if you're someone like myself. If you're in this community, where you're trying to restructure what people value, what we value. If it's family, if it's direct local living, if it's farming, if it's weaning off the tit of Whole Foods and Sprouts and all these fake idols, representations of nature. If you want that, globalism isn't the way to do it. So yeah, there's going to be a hard time. There's going to be a hard time because it is going to stop movement. It's going to stop the cheap labor and the cheap products from China, and there's going to be a little bit of a lull there where you're going to have to eat maybe potatoes. Maybe you're going to have to. It could be difficult, but it doesn't matter. The alternative is way worse. Way worse.